Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn, and this is episode number 769 of the podcast, and it is Friday the 6th of September 2024 as I record this. In today's show, I'm talking about self-publishing training manuals and focusing on your true fans with Guy Windsor. So training manuals are books that teach a physical skill, and while many people do this with courses, many people also prefer a book. So Guy talks about what to include, tips for photographs and content structure, and we also talk about niching down, creating for superfans rather than anyone else, and multiple streams of income. So that's coming up in the interview section. In publishing things, Amazon celebrates a decade of Kindle Unlimited, and in their press release they go into some interesting details. So they say, while the Harry Potter series remains the most read books on KU in the UK and J.K. Rowling is the most read author, it is romance which has been the most popular genre to read on KU over the past decade, followed by the lure of a page-turning crime thriller. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone that romance is winning. Since 2014, KU members have read more than 3 billion books globally. Since 2014, authors using KDP and choosing to use Kindle Unlimited have collectively earned more than $3.5 billion for reads of their book through Kindle Unlimited. Just on that, $3.5 billion, that isn't included in any of the traditional sales stats because that's not sales, that's pages read. So when you see authors who are incredibly popular on KU, they might not look like they're making a ton of sales. It's kind of crazy. For example, you can't hit the New York Times list with KU reads. So it's always worth remembering, like, where do these stats come from? And Amazon very rarely gives away their stats. Over the last 10 years on Kindle Unlimited in the UK, the most popular genre is romance, with Colleen Hoover proving the most popular author within the category. And if you remember, Colleen Hoover started out as an indie and now she's hybrid, I think. Thrillers are the next most popular, with this genre comprising almost 50% of the top 20 most read titles in the UK. And there is a real appetite for independent authors. It is indie author L.J. Ross. Congratulations, Louise, who leads the way as the most popular KDP author on Kindle Unlimited, with 6 of her DCI Ryan mystery novels in the top 20 most read titles. L.J. Ross is the UK's second most popular author after J.K. Rowling on Kindle Unlimited. And this is another example. L.J. Ross, Louise, is absolutely fantastic. She's obviously one of the biggest authors in the UK, and yet she is often overlooked at literary festivals and some awards because her success is in a different way. But now she has her own press and everything, so amazing. Also, other notable KDP authors feature prominently, including J.D. Kirk, J.M. Dalgleish and Rachel McLean. And Rachel's been on the show before and she's coming back before Christmas. The top 10 most read authors in the UK include the authors I've just talked about, but also Michael Anderle makes the list at number 5. And Michael is the founder of 20 Books to 50k, who's been on the show a number of times. So amazing news for indie authors. And if you write a crime series or romance here in the UK, it might be worth going indie. So in marketing things, Written Word Media have announced a new partnership with Retire Hub, an innovative online community for retirees to bring hand-picked book recommendations straight to their inbox, tailored to their tastes. You can add this onto a promo stack if you book that at Written Word Media. Now, I really like this. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that is going to expand our markets into sort of tangential areas, and retired people read an absolute ton. And so they're a great audience. So I'm definitely looking forward to trying that. I know there's a lot of retired people listening, and I have a lot of retired people on my email list. And so I think this is very good. So this is Written Word Media. You can see the press release at their site, links in the show notes as ever. And if you do book a promo stack there, then you can pick that. On the Draft to Digital blog, Nick Thacker lists the 8 levels of author success, and this is if you want to have an author business specifically. I think levels is the wrong word, as it's more about opportunities to explore, as you can be successful at many of these levels. I almost see it more like a hub with spokes, and the different spokes are the different directions you can go in as an author. It doesn't have to be in some kind of hierarchy. But the first is mindset, and I totally agree with this. The mindset of treat your writing as a business. So yes, you're an artist, but you're also a business person if you want to be financially successful. So you're not just an author, you are the CEO of your own career. And that definitely takes a mindset shift. Then the article moves through expanding into different formats, so different versions of ebooks, print books, audiobooks, translations, lots of ways of turning your basic manuscript into these multiple formats. Level 3 is expanding your reach. And of course, Draft to Digital is a wide distributor. And level 3 is liberating your books from any exclusive agreements you may have with a single retailer. It's also leveraging direct sales on your website and getting your books listed in as many stores and libraries as possible worldwide. Now, I think this is quite funny talking about this straight after the KU article, because obviously some authors can do incredibly well in KU. But LJ Ross, for example, now has her own printing company and has books in bookstores here in the UK, and essentially has stayed in KU for ebooks, but is wide with print and audio and all these other things. So you can do a mix and match of these and have different kinds of success. Level 4 is special editions and adding more value through signed editions, exclusive covers, and related content spun off from the main books. Level 5 is about bundling, grouping existing products into bundles, box sets, groups of products, maximizing revenue and offering more content. Level 6 goes beyond the book to merchandise, unique products, soundtracks, other things that are spin-offs. Level 7, and this is where I think this is an absolute nightmare, which is personal access. Personal access might include writing retreats, events, consultations, and other things. Now, I think that's very common for non-fiction authors, but I think a lot of fiction authors aren't necessarily up for any of that. I do some of these things, but very little for my fiction. I know some incredibly big romance authors run whole events for their fans. Not just romance, actually. I was thinking of some thriller authors too who do this. But yeah, that's a big thing. And level 8 is the brand empire, expanding your writing universe potentially with co-writers. And this is definitely the Michael Anderle model for sure. LMBPN, his company with his wife and co-business person, Judith, that's what they do. They have a writing universe, or a number of different writing universes. But again, this is not for everyone. So I found this a really interesting article. As I said, I think it's more of a sort of web or a hub with spokes going in different directions, and you can expand your business into different areas. But the main thing is really about defining your definition of success. For example, maybe you do want to get a traditional publishing deal and that is your definition of success. Maybe you want to win an award. So these are different ways we can think about success, but you must define your definition of success, and you will struggle if you choose someone else's definition of success as your own and then you try and measure yourself against them, because if it's not true to your values, you're going to be unhappy. So I was thinking about this, and I really love writing. I love writing and I love creating. So I love creating these beautiful books like the latest one, Blood Vintage. Yesterday I did my book trailer, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I love making images in Midjourney. I love making visual media. So I love all that. And yes, I want to make a ton of money. I really do like money, but I also love my quiet, introverted life. And even though I like money, it's not my number one goal. My number one goal is freedom. And the reason I like money is it gives me more freedom. So it's not that I want to be the richest author in the world. That's not the goal. The goal is to be the freest author in the world. And I certainly do not want to be famous. And I remember Honorée Corder telling me this years ago now. She said there are 3 big goals that people have: fame, finances, or freedom. So fame, finances, or freedom, those are the kind of main avenues. And sometimes you'll end up comparing yourself to an author who has a different value. So if mine is freedom and I try and compare myself to someone who is famous or makes a ton more money than me, then I might be unhappy. Whereas I choose freedom and things like I don't want to run a business with loads of employees. I don't want to do co-writing. So yeah. These are the things that are important to me, and I'm just trying to encourage you to think about what is important to you. And it might not be fame, finances, or freedom. It might be something else, but it's a nice alliteration there. So anyway, back to the original article that is on the Draft to Digital blog. And also a new podcast for you this week. Many of you know James Blatch from the Self-Publishing Show, and James has been on this show several times. Well, James has a new podcast with romance and paranormal author Cara Clare. It's called Indie Writers Club, and there are a couple of episodes up already, an introduction to them as co-hosts and a new episode on character versus plot. Which side are you? So you can find that wherever you are listening to this. Check it out at Indie Writers Club. Link in the show notes or just search for it on your app. So in AI things, coming up this week for Americans is the Oprah AI special, as reported by Variety.com. On the 12th of September 2024, Oprah Winfrey is hosting a primetime special on the use and impact of artificial intelligence on people's everyday lives. It's called AI and the Future of Us, and will feature Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, Bill Gates, Marques Brownlee, who my husband loves on YouTube, and others. It's aiming to be a serious, entertaining, and meaningful base for every viewer to understand AI and empower everyone to be part of one of the most important global conversations of the 21st century. So I love this, and I really, really, really hope I can get to watch this, that it will be available somewhere else to stream or whatever. But this feels like a really big moment, as Oprah is such a trusted voice. And I guess she's done a lot of focus groups or whatever, and she will talk about things in an emotional way and will wrangle these tech bros, because Sam and Bill and Marques are definitely tech bros. And yeah, I hope it helps people feel more at home with the possibilities of AI tools. And also, I'm thrilled because, obviously, Oprah is a woman. And one of the problems with AI at the moment is women are well behind. We are behind, ladies. Now, possibly if you listen to this show, you are not behind. But overall, The Economist has reported that women use AI tools 16 to 20% less than men. And if this is going to be the basis of a new economy and new jobs and new opportunities, new creativity, we need to become more comfortable with the tools. And of course, I'm a woman who is pro AI and uses a lot, and I know a lot of you out there do this, but this is a bit like the investing environment, which again is dominated by men, and women are behind, which means women end up poorer when they're old. And this annoys me. So ladies, please watch Oprah and let's see what happens. I mean, I imagine she's going to be talking about the risks, but also the positives, as they kind of say this is one of the most important global conversations of the 21st century. And also, I'm not even going to go into a lot of the AI drama that has been going around Authorlandia, as it's known, in the last week or so, because I try and stay away from the drama and I try and look into the future. One of my Clifton strengths is futurist. And I am always thinking of decades ahead and how we can position ourselves now so that we are in a good position for the future. And so try and lift yourself up. It's almost like levitate above the drama and say, okay, forget today, forget the next year. Let's think about the next 5 years, the next 10 years. What do I need to know? What do my kids need to know so that they can be in a good position in the changing economy? And that has nothing, like you could say that has nothing to do with books. And in fact, Jonathan, my husband, is a pharmaceutical company, and that company, like many other companies, is going through this kind of transformation. And so this is happening across all industries, not just our industry. So let's try and keep a broader view of the world as we go on. Also, Amazon is revamping Alexa to use Anthropic's Claude. And I've talked about Claude before, but someone asked me yesterday, what is Claude? And I was like, No, you have to know about Claude. So Claude.ai, CLAUDE.ai, and I think it's the more creative AI compared to ChatGPT. And so Amazon has the remarkable Alexa coming in October, and that will be powered by Claude. And of course, Apple's new intelligence and Siri might be powered by OpenAI's models. That's all coming soon. In the next couple of months, we're going to see some very big changes to hardware and software based on the developments. So yes, that was reported in The Verge, links in the show notes. In personal news, I have been starting the marketing for Blood Vintage, and the proof edition came, if you haven't seen it, as very cool silver foil sprayed edges. Oh, I'm so excited. It's on my Instagram and Facebook at JF Author. I love it. I think some people have said it is the best cover I've done so far, and I'm particularly proud of it because I made the image in Midjourney, and then my cover designer Jane turned that into a proper cover. I also made a book trailer this week using image to video AI tool Runway ML. I have been wanting to play with Runway for ages, but I just haven't had the time. You can see the book trailer at jfpenn.com/blood vintage trailer. So jfpenn.com/blood vintage trailer. And if you are in my Patreon community, I have a video on how I did it coming this week. So how to use, and I used Claude, Midjourney, Runway ML, and Canva. So I am a very visual person. I am a very visual writer. I kind of write cinematically. And so I loved making this book trailer. It is so much fun. The book is with my editor, Kristen, and one of the viticulture experts, the wine people, has come back with some feedback, and I'm just waiting for one more person, and also the folklore expert who are doing expert beta reading. So I'm expecting to do the final edits next week, and the Kickstarter is coming up on the 1st of October, and there may well be some changes to it based on conversations I'm having with, let's say, industry people about the book. You can sign up for the pre-launch page, and so this might end up being a very exclusive edition. I'm going to just leave that tease with you. You can sign up for the pre-launch at jfpenn.com/blood vintage. So thanks for all your emails and comments and photos this week. Ash said, I recently started listening to your podcast while driving up to an area called Zululand in South Africa. Your interviews have been a wonderful source of information and ideas. As a non-USA UK writer, it sometimes feels much harder to not rely on platforms like Amazon. Your interview with Adam Beswick gave me the courage to believe that selling direct from my website might be possible despite my location. And your discussion with Thorne Coyle on being more curious about the business side has motivated me to stop feeling sorry for myself when it becomes overwhelming. And Ash sent a picture of over 200 books that she's putting stickers on, and the book is called Down at the Jika Jika Tavern, and I love this. I think this is brilliant because I have to apologise because this podcast is listened to in 220 countries around the world. And most of the time we're talking about the USA or the UK. Obviously, I'm in the UK and the USA is the biggest book market in the world for English language. So yes, I do talk predominantly about those areas. But it's wonderful to hear from Ash in South Africa, and always wonderful to hear from you wherever you are in the world. And in fact, Janet sent a picture from Pappenheim, Bavaria, on a walking break from writing the biography of Irene Mauer. Got shoulder ache and sent a picture of a river and some trees and some kayaks, which was lovely. So also tons and tons of positivity about David Viergoets last week. DL Wilson on YouTube said, great industry info, very interesting interview. As someone who's had a taste of the Kindle void, the direct route with creative products and providing an experience for readers gives me hope. Yes, and very important to just refer you back to that interview, because earlier in this one, I've talked about the authors having success in KU. And of course, some people do, some people don't. But we all have to find our own path. A. David Singh, also on YouTube, said, thanks for sharing the interview with David. Very exciting to hear about the enterprising stuff he's up to. Direct sales is the future for indie authors. And finally, Brent said, while I would find David's physical letter series a little daunting, the concept of taking book intellectual property into other mediums is a fantastic idea. With all the avenues out there now with technologies to aid in creating high-quality products, the only hindrance to doing this is my own self-doubt. Listening to this has let me know this is a real possibility if I roll my sleeves up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Brent. And thanks to everyone who left a comment or sent an email. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, send me pictures of where you're listening, Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. I love to hear from you. It makes this more of a conversation. So today's show is sponsored by Findaway Voices by Spotify, the platform for independent authors who want to unlock the world's largest audiobook platforms. And in fact, I've had a question this week, which was, how do I get my book on Spotify? Well, you go through findawayvoices.com. With no upfront costs, you can distribute your audiobooks globally to nearly 40 retailers and library services, including Spotify, Audible, Apple Books, Google Play, and more. Findaway Voices also gives you total control over your retail and library pricing, and you keep 100% of royalties on Spotify and 80% everywhere else. I've been using Findaway Voices by Spotify to publish my audiobooks wide for years, and every single one of my audiobooks that I produce goes through Findaway Voices, both full-length fiction and non-fiction, novellas, short stories, and I just love how easy it is to upload my files, choose distribution platforms, and of course you can opt out of different platforms too. Also set my pricing and take advantage of promotional pricing on Spotify, Apple, and Chirp Books, which is a really good way to sell a lot. You can do promotions, and of course Chirp Books is run by BookBub, so that can be a really good way to market. I also find the reporting dashboard useful, where I can see sales and library borrows, royalty reports and payments, as well as aggregated demographic data about Spotify premium listeners who've listened to my audiobook. Take your audiobook everywhere to earn everywhere with Findaway Voices by Spotify. Go to findawayvoices.com/pen, Penn, to publish your next audiobook project. That's findawayvoices.com/pen. Links in the show notes. So this type of corporate sponsorship pays for the hosting, transcription and editing, but my time in creating the show is sponsored by my community at patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Thanks to the 9 new patrons who've joined this week, and thanks to everyone who's been supporting for months and years. If you join the community, you get access to everything, all the backlist videos and audio covering topics on creativity and AI, mindset and business, my patron-only Q&A, solo podcast episodes, and now my office hours where I do live things. And as I mentioned, I didn't say, last week I did a thing on AI translation and also using human editors and proofreaders. And this week, as I mentioned, I've got AI tools for making book trailers. So all of that is included, and it is a monthly subscription, the equivalent of buying me a black coffee a month. And of course, you're welcome to go in for 1 month, download everything and then disappear again. Or a couple of coffees if you're feeling generous. You get access to everything. So if you get value from the show and you want more, come on over and join us. Patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepenn. And please go to the website rather than join through the app if you have an Apple phone, as that will go up in November. Just go to patreon.com, patreon.com/thecreativepenn. Right, let's get into the interview. Guy Windsor is a consulting swordsman, teacher, and author specializing in medieval and Renaissance Italian swordsmanship. He runs SwordSchool and is the host of the Sword Guy podcast. Today, we're talking about his book, From Your Head to Their Hands: How to Write, Publish, and Market Training Manuals for Historical Martial Artists. So welcome back to the show, Guy.
Thanks, Joe. Lovely to be here.
Yes, great to talk to you again. Now, you were last on the show back in 2021 when you talked about pivoting your business from in-person to online and scalable, which was much needed in the pandemic. So just give us an update as to how that change has gone for you, how your business looks today, and what are your multiple streams of income?
Well, I actually made that pivot in around 2015 because I needed to get location independence so I could move my family from Finland to the UK because of elderly parents. But that was just super lucky timing because then the pandemic occurred and we were fine because we were living off books and courses, which did really well during the pandemic, rather than me living off in-person teaching, which I've been doing before. It's blissful, honestly, right? The difference between if I don't show up to work, I don't get paid. And well, if I feel like taking 3 months off to go do this creative project or do something with my kids or whatever, I can do that and it won't make a really big difference in the short term. It's so freeing, which means, among other things, I can work on pretty much anything I like. Now, you asked about multiple streams of income and you sent me the question beforehand, so I made a list. So there's books, which are training manuals mostly, also some translations and other things, which are in print, ebook, and some of them are also in audio. Online courses, and those are the two really big earners. The two of those together is like 90% of my income. And the rest of it comes from in-person seminars, which is actually my favorite thing. I travel around all over the place teaching seminars in America and Singapore and New Zealand and wherever. And it's fantastic, but it's really, really demanding. Then I have my own social media site called Sword People, which brings in some income. I have a Patreon, which brings in a tiny bit of income. I also, back in 2007, the training space next door to the warehouse space next door to the warehouse space we were using as a training space came on the market. So I bought it. So my students there are renting that space off me. So that's another income stream. I also have like merch, like t-shirts and whatnot, which hardly sell anything at all. So if anyone wants a really cool t-shirt, I can point them in the right direction. So like by platform, my Teachable account is the single biggest chunk of money coming in monthly. Then my wide books as an aggregate, I don't really pay attention to the different platforms there. My Shopify store would be third. Rent on the Sal would be fourth. Then seminars, teaching in person, Sword People, and all the other stuff is sort of the tail end.
That's great. And let's just point out that you started out by saying it was blissful, which
yes.
When people hear that whole list, they might be thinking, oh my goodness, how big is your team? How many hours do you work? So just maybe talk about how the structure of this works and I guess how automated it is.
I do all the actual creative stuff myself and I produce an average of, I suppose, a book a year and an online course a year, something like that. I have an assistant who is fabulous and she does the tedious admin stuff. And she started out by doing the transcriptions for my podcast. And then she kind of took over all of the writing the show notes, naming the episodes, uploading them everywhere, getting them all in the right place at the right time. And then she took on my newsletter as well. So I write it, but she does all the formatting and making sure all the links are right and all that sort of thing. And so I've outsourced as much as possible of the stuff that involves, shall we say, spreadsheets. I have an allergy to spreadsheets, so if it involves a spreadsheet, I hire a professional. Katie is excellent at spreadsheets. I also have an accountant who does anything related to bookkeeping and accounting and all that sort of stuff, because that's just not what I'm good at. I sort of break out in a rash when I see a spreadsheet. But it sounds like a lot of stuff because I've been accumulating it for 20 years. Okay. I didn't produce all of this stuff in the last week. My first book came out in 2004. My first online course came out in 2016. I started my podcast in 2020 while everyone was miserable at home and they needed a friendly sword person to come into their ear hole every Friday, just basically to make everyone feel better. So it's sort of grown bit by bit. But I don't actually work that much. I mean, normally I've got maybe 3 or 4 hours of creative juice in me in a given day. And then I'm pretty much done. And I sort of wander off and do some woodwork or, I don't know, go for a walk with one of my kids or whatever.
Yeah, so
it's little and often.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the principles, I guess, of lifestyle design, business design. And I think about this sometimes. I mean, maybe you do too, which is, yeah, I could build a really big company and make 7 figures or whatever. But
you could, Joe. I don't think I could.
No, but as in, I feel like you and I are quite similar in this way, in that we're happy in our work, but we don't need to scale and work harder or employ more people, because that's not the lifestyle we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I had 4 people working for me in various capacities. And it didn't make my life any better. So with goodwill on both sides, that got whittled down to just Katie. I would be lost without Katie. Let me be quite clear. So, I mean, fortunately, my assistant before Katie spent like 4 months as basically what happened with her. It was great. Her name's Kate Tilton. She's an author assistant. We were working together for ages, and she basically outgrew me. And she had this utterly charming way of firing me as a client, because I just wasn't going to bring in the kind of work she wanted to do. That was fine. But she spent several months working with Katie to teach her the specifics of how to publish the books on all the platforms, that kind of thing. So hopefully when Katie eventually outgrows me, as she inevitably will, she'll also train up her successor. Because again, without the assistant, I think the first thing to go would be the podcast. I couldn't keep it regular.
Right. Well, I think, and that's really good, because something like a podcast, I mean, I have help with this show, and that is outsourceable because it's kind of the same every week, the bit of the production side of it. But let's get into the training manuals, which we're focusing on today. A lot of people do want to do training manuals. So whether, let's say they might be teaching yoga or knitting or all kinds of physical skills. And of course, you can do videos and all that kind of thing. But talk about training manuals. What are training manuals, and what are the key aspects to consider?
Well, as I see it, a training manual is a book that is intended to communicate a particular skill. It doesn't really matter what that skill is. Most skills can be communicated, at least in part, through a book of some kind. You need the regular kind of the front and back matter. And if you're doing anything like martial arts, you have to have safety stuff baked in so that no one can accuse you of promoting dangerous practices. But basically, in terms of the actual content, I'm assuming that anyone trying to write a training manual actually knows their subject already, which isn't necessarily true. I mean, I wrote my second training manual because I wanted to learn the subject that the training manual was about. So it took me a lot longer than it would now to write the same thing, because I was learning the system of early 17th century Italian rapier as I went. So you can use the writing process as a way of learning the thing you're trying to teach. But you need a set of basic principles. So your whatever general principles of your art may be. I mean, in knitting, I have knitted maybe 2 things in my life. The last one was probably 40 years ago. So perhaps something like controlling your yarn and not getting it tangled might be a principle. But whatever things that the student needs to know that will apply to everything they do from there on. With swords, it's quite straightforward. Don't get hit. If you get hit, it's always wrong. So that's like one simple principle. And then you have your practical instruction, which the thing that people tend to get wrong when I've seen less well executed training manuals is you have to understand what is the very first thing that the person needs to know. And if you're an expert in your field, that can be quite a difficult thing to figure out. So, for example, if I'm teaching you how to parry with a sword, well, a parry is a defense done against an attack. So whoever you're training with needs to know the attack. So you have to teach the attack before you teach the parry, because the parry doesn't exist until the attack occurs. So whatever the skill is, you need to figure out what the prerequisites are and make sure they go in order. I mean, the classic mistake in this area comes from Windows back in the 90s, where there was this instruction thing, which was press, I think it was Control Alt Delete, enter to wipe your hard drive. Right? Right? So someone who's just doing as they're told and haven't read the whole thing before they get stuck in, I know this because it happened to a friend of mine, merrily pressed Control Alt Delete, enter, and then was astonished when everything just disappeared.
It wiped their hard drive.
Yes, it wiped their hard drive. Now, if they just taken the end of that sentence and stuck it at the beginning, right, it would have saved an awful lot of trouble. And it's that empathy for the student and understanding what it is they need to see first. That is one of the really key things about writing a good training manual, I think.
I guess another thing is thinking about progression. So, and that maybe you won't do one mega training manual, but you might do some for beginners, some for intermediate, some for advanced, and then assuming the knowledge in the earlier ones. So, I mean, this can turn into a lot of books, right?
Yeah. And it's best to start with the most basic one first. For two reasons. Firstly, there are vastly more beginners than there are relatively experienced people. I mean, by definition. So the first book will have the biggest market, and those that like it and they like your approach will then want to get the next one and the next one and the next one. So I did this with my Rapier training workbooks, which we talked about in the last interview. And now it's available. I just got fed up with handling multiple SKUs. So I just got rid of those, and it's just the combined version, like the complete training manual, the complete workbook that people get now, but it's actually made up of what was 4 separately published books.
So that could be a bundle or...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, that's really interesting. And then I guess you mentioned respecting the person who's going to get it, but actually testing the manual, as you said. I mean, that Microsoft
absolutely.
One, if you'd have handed it to an actual human, I still remember the first time my mum tried to use a mouse, like a mouse with a computer. She took it to the end of the table and then said, "Where do I go now? It's about to fall off the table." And it was like, yeah, you pick it up and you move it again. And she didn't even know that you could do that. So we have to assume people don't have a clue, basically.
Yeah. And I have access to a lot of beginners because my job is teaching people how to fight with swords. So I can get my training manuals tested by the actual target audience. And I think, honestly, for any kind of pedagogical work, it's a really good idea to be able to test how it works in the real world. I mean, I remember back in, I think it was 2005, a couple of guys in Singapore had come across my first book, The Swordsman's Companion, in a bookshop, back in the old days when people went to bookshops. And they emailed me with a question, and we got into an email back and forth, and they eventually came to Finland to train with me for a month. And so I got to see them doing the drills from the book, having only learned them from the book. And this was before YouTube was even invented, so there wasn't really much in the way of video sharing. So they'd never seen the motion, they'd only seen the pictures. And as a result, they were moving in this sort of stop, start way, because that's what they'd seen. And
it's hard not to do that in a book, because there's still pictures.
It is very hard, which is why, I mean, these days, now that the technology has caught up, I create videos for any motion that I'm trying to teach, and I link to that in the book itself. So you produce the video, you throw it up on Vimeo, for example, create a redirectable link to that video in case you ever want to change the video and you don't have to then change the book. And then you put that redirectable link, something easy to type, into the book itself, and maybe even create a QR code. And yeah, I think we went through that in some detail last time.
Yeah. So with the photos in the book, talk a bit about that, because of course they need to be consistent, they need to be professional level. Yeah. There's all kinds of things that go into that. So what are the challenges for preparing them, and also for putting them into the book around costing?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I cheat generally because I have students who are serious amateur photographers who honestly enjoy spending a whole weekend doing sword pictures for a book, right? So if possible, get a professional is like the best advice, or an enthusiastic amateur, because the thing is, a picture that looks great on your phone may print appallingly badly when it's converted to black and white and thrown into a book. So for any of my books that have lots of photographs, which is quite a few of them, I mean, the main tips that my photographer gave me are you want the camera as far away as you can reasonably get. So you have this kind of flat focus. If the camera is too close, you get this slight fisheye effect. So you want to be the camera as far away as it can reasonably get. If you're shooting action shots, it's different if you're shooting like close-ups for a craft thing. That has a whole separate like macro lenses and whatnot. But basically, you need to get the right focus so that the image is as flat as you can get it, so you don't get any distortion. And you want to be shooting in as high a resolution as you can get. It's going to end up being a 300 DPI TIFF file. That's what the printers usually want. And that means however it's cropped down and modified, it will need to end up as 300 dpi. Anything less than that, you're going to get a grainy picture. So, I mean, the last really photo heavy book I did was the second edition of my Duelist Companion. And I ended up spending nearly $2,000 on not even layout, just getting the photos we had made print ready, right? It's hard. And if you're doing this on a shoestring, you might want to think about not doing a print book if there's lots and lots of pictures. You know, get loads of people to like the ebook and the PDF and then use that money to get the pictures sorted out for a print book.
Well, even on that though, many people don't realize this, but Amazon, publishing on Amazon, they take a delivery charge. And most of the time it's very, very small because most of us just have text-based books. But if people don't get their images right in their EPUB, it can be massive and you could end up losing all your royalties. So if you are gonna do an ebook that people can read on, say, a big tablet or whatever with all the images, then again, I think Vellum does it. I'm sure Atticus does it, but formatting those pictures appropriately so they're high res, but also don't take all the don't just do it yourself and then assume it's fine. Yeah. So this is the thing. I feel like people just think that they can stick photos in everywhere and it won't impact cost, but it is a huge cost. So how did you decide how many pictures in the book versus text and balancing that with cost of the final product?
Okay. I don't consider the cost at all because I don't require any specific project to break even. If enough projects are making enough money, I can use that money to make, for example, this book. I mean, the second edition Duelist Companion it's made its costs back, but I don't think it's made me any money. But I don't actually care because it's a book that needs to be there in my body of work. It needed updating because it came out in 2006, so it was really a bit long in the tooth. I didn't have an ebook version of it. I didn't have a hardback version of it. So now there's a full color hardback, which is pricey.
How much?
Paperback. I charge, I think it's 55 quid for it.
Okay, so it really is only for the super fans.
Right. Yeah. And some people buy it and some people don't. And if they can't afford that or they don't want it, they can get the paperback, which is about 30 quid. And then my ebooks are, I think, 10. But again, I'm only talking about on my Shopify store. I don't even look at what the wide thing does.
So you do put them wide? Like, for example,
yeah, absolutely.
Ingram,
everything goes wide.
Does that, right?
Yeah. So I have hardbacks through Ingram, paperbacks through Amazon and Ingram, ebooks through Amazon and all the platforms, mostly through Drafter Digital, but I do have my own KDP account and my own Kobo account. Everything else but it's super wide. The color hardback was too expensive to do through Ingram, but on Book Vault it was fine. So the color hardback is only available on my store. So people who find the regular hardback on wherever they find it, in the blurb, in the sales copy, it should say, because I think Katie did this just a couple of weeks ago, you can get the full color version of this at swordschool.shop. So people who want the hardback and want the full color, they can get it for pretty much the same price on swordschool.shop as they can get the black and white hardback anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like Book Vault is really good for color printing.
Yes, they're excellent. Just on the why, I mean, you said you don't really mind so much if it doesn't break even, but most people are looking at this as more of making more money. And I was thinking about this, like just a fundamental question. Why do a book? Why not just do a course when it's a physical skill?
The main reason is some people prefer books. You may say, like, theoretically, a video course is better for teaching skills involving movement. And you're probably right. But there are some people who simply don't like them. They prefer books. So the books are for the people who don't like the online courses. Also, if you're establishing yourself as an authority, then authors have authority and online course producers don't.
I totally agree. Isn't it weird? It's a weird thing, but it's true.
But also books are spreadable and shareable in a way that online courses aren't. So, I mean, those guys in Singapore came across my book in a bookshop, and that changed many things, including, I mean, I was in Singapore just this year teaching a seminar because those guys found that book in a bookshop. You might go to somebody's house and see one of my books on the shelf and go, oh, that's interesting. And I go, oh, yeah, I'm not really into swords and stuff anymore. Why don't you borrow it? And so they'll take it away and they'll read it and they'll go, oh, yeah, this is quite nice. And then they'll come to my website and go, oh, I actually quite fancy some of that. And off they go. So books are sticky and they're durable, particularly physical books. They have a certain resonance and heft. And the thing is, personally, my house is full of books, but I hardly use online courses at all because I don't really like them.
Yeah, I buy a lot of courses and end up not doing them all. And I know people listening, would do the same. But yeah, just on that, the hardback, high quality print books, I heard some stat, I can't remember where it was, but that hardback books can go through 7 pairs of hands over time, either gifted or secondhand or whatever. Whereas, and in fact, many secondhand bookshops won't take the crappy paperbacks because they don't, not crappy, but just in general, paperbacks don't last so long. So they would rather have nice hardbacks. But I did want to ask you, how did your book end up in a bookshop in Singapore?
Okay. It was my first book. It was published by an American publisher that is now defunct. And basically, this is actually an interesting story about formatting, if there can be an interesting story about formatting. Okay. A colleague of mine called Christian Tobler, he is to German medieval martial arts what I am to Italian medieval martial arts. And he had a similar book to mine, My Swordsman's Companion, coming out in the same year. His was on the German medieval stuff, mine was on the Italian medieval stuff. And he insisted on sort of A4 US letter size, quite a big workbook because it would be better for the pictures. And he was completely right. It's a better product. My publisher had a bit more leverage with me because it was my first book. And he said, well, we should go with 6x9. And I said, okay. And we did. Barnes & Noble picked up 50 copies of my friend's book and they picked up 600 of mine.
Yeah.
Just because of the format. That has nothing to do with our reputations because he actually had previous books out and I didn't. But Barnes & Noble wanted 600 copies of my paperback and they sold them through relatively quickly, which was nice. But it was a Barnes & Noble in Singapore which just happened to have 1 or 2 copies because Barnes & Noble put in a chunky order.
Yeah, and that is another argument for standard formatting. It's cheaper.
Right.
It would have been cheaper for the publisher to produce those copies, so Barnes & Noble would have seen a cheaper price as well.
Absolutely.
Whereas cut, bigger sizes, and then they don't fit so well on certain shelves.
Exactly.
Yeah, all of that kind of thing. Okay, so I just want to mention audio, because you did say you had some audio, but of course training manuals don't really work for audio, right?
Generally not. I mean, from your head to their hands doesn't rely on pictures, and I'm not like illustrating how to type. So that body of knowledge, that skill set doesn't rely on visuals. So there is an audiobook of that. But my audiobooks, basically anything that is not like physical practice stuff. So I have a book called The Theory and Practices of Historical Martial Arts. That's available as an audiobook. My current favorite is a colleague of mine in Italy who is a trained musical theatre performer. We had lunch in Florence just in January, and I had this genius idea, which I thought was a genius idea, which was I would get her to read this medieval manuscript on martial arts written in 1480s by a guy called Filippo Vadi. It's quite short. I got her to read the Italian as an audiobook, and I read my translation of it. So there's an audiobook which is this beautiful Italian voice reading beautiful Italian. And then there's my kind of clunky workaday English voice reading clunky workaday English. But for, I guess, 99.9% of listeners, that's of no interest whatsoever. But for that, I mean, I told one of my students about it and she literally got goosebumps, right? So for my niche, something like that is just catnip. And so totally worth doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you definitely prove the point about niching down. You have a good business based on something very, very niche.
Well, the thing is, if it's very specific, it's easy to market.
Yes.
Right? If I say, No, Joe, I'm writing a book about this specific medieval manuscript, which covers this specific style of fighting. Are you interested? Yes, no. For you, that's an easy no. You don't have to think about it. Am I right?
Well,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
must say, I've never bought any of your books, Guy.
That's fine. That's fine. I don't mind because I didn't write them for you.
No, exactly.
I know who I wrote them for, and the people I wrote them for really like them. And it's easy for me to find those people because I can describe what the book is super specifically. And the same is true for online courses. It's like I don't spend any time fussing about the sales copy on my sales page because the people I'm marketing to, if I say, I've got this online course about, well, I've got one coming out in a few weeks on medieval dagger combat, right? It's an easy hell yes for some people, and it's an easy no thanks for everyone else. And so the sales copy isn't even really relevant. It's just there to fill out the page a bit, to give people an idea of, just to make sure that they understand what is going to be on the course, what is not going to be on the course, what they can expect. So just to give a clear picture of what the course contains and some sample videos in case they're not sure. And then they know. And I don't have to plug the value.
Yeah. On that, let's talk about marketing then, because
Sure.
obviously you have this direct store, obviously you have an email list, but is it mainly SEO because people who are interested in this go searching?
I don't pay any attention to SEO whatsoever.
But
Like,
you
not
naturally
even the slightest little bit.
do SEO, basically.
Yeah, I have natural SEO. I mean, the WordPress version that I'm using has this sort of SEO score. Professional who built my website cares about things like SEO. And so you have this like SEO score when you write a blog post. And mine is usually under 15% because I just don't care. Because again, most people in the early days found me because I was running a school and I was advertising in putting up flyers in martial arts shops and doing demos at games conventions, things like that. And word spread and people brought their friends. And so the school did fine from the very get-go. And then when the first book came out, that sort of established my international reputation and people started hiring me to go abroad to teach in these places. And as the more books come out, there's a sort of natural, well, if you're interested in my topic, I am very hard to avoid.
But that's what I mean about natural
Yeah.
SEO because, and I mean,
Yeah.
even my site, The Creative Penn, I mean, I have also been pretty similar. I have put content up, but when it's around the same topic, you naturally rank over time for things. And if people
Sure.
start trusting you and linking to you, do you do any paid marketing at all now?
I have done, and it was always at best break even and usually a giant waste of money. I mean, the first bit of paid advertising that seemed to be working was I did Amazon ads for a bit. And at one point I was spending 500 quid a month on Amazon ads. And I thought, that's a lot of money. Why don't I just turn it off and see what happens? And I turned it off. And 3 months later, my sales were the same. So
It's a good experiment.
yeah, it was a great experiment. Saved me a fortune. And the thing is, sometimes you type a search term into Google, for example, and let's say you're too lazy to click on ebay.com. So you just put eBay and hit go and eBay pops up. If you're looking for eBay, if eBay is paying for ads for their own name, then they're wasting their money. This was established by an economist who I think saved eBay hundreds of millions. So, when your stuff arrives at the top of the search, when people type in normal search terms anyway, there's no sense paying for advertising. And honestly, good advertising is a spreadsheet game, right? You have to have like analytics and figure out which ads are performing and turn some on and turn some off and tweak the amount of money you're paying on this. It's horrible. So I've hired people to do it. And again, they were all competent, but the only one I've ever had who I would consider hiring again, the thing that made him different is he would work for a relatively small fixed fee and then a percentage of sales. So we would send.
That's very rare.
Yes, it is very rare. The thing is, if the product is advertising, I think that should be the minimum, right? Really, it should be the standard because
that's not the reality of the market. That's old information. So for the last year, I've been running only Amazon auto ads. And this will work for you as well because you're so specific. So on my top selling books, which are How to Write a Novel, this is nonfiction only, by the way, How to Write Nonfiction and How to Make a Living with Your Writing. They're like my top selling books. So I just put an auto ad, which is all you do is select the book and you give it a budget. And then the Amazon algorithm does everything else. And I check it once a month. And that's it.
Yeah, but you're still giving money to Jeff Bezos, who has enough.
Yes, but I'm getting more back. So I have found that just doing a basic level of, and also let's face it, I'm in a much more competitive niche than you are because
that's very true.
There's a lot of books on how to write a novel. So for me to keep my books higher up, then I need to do something. And I just decided that I want to have something on Amazon because now I don't focus on Amazon. I focus on my direct store and all of that. But I just have that kind of running in the background. So I wanted to make sure people listening knew that it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet game. I do not do that at all with Amazon ads.
Yeah. Fair enough. But still, basically, I'm not willing to make Jeff even richer to maybe get a few more sales I don't care about, because the only people I care about are my people, right? So the people on my mailing list, the people who listen to my podcast, the people who are on my Sword People platform, the people who show up to my seminars, the people who are already buying my books. Right. Those are my people. And I will do anything for them. I mean, I'll write them whatever book they want. Someone who finds a book of mine on Amazon when they weren't specifically looking for me, they're probably not my person yet. Now, if they buy the book and they like it, they may come onto my platform and become one of my people. But until that happens, I don't care. I am not interested because there are far too many people out there who may or may not like my stuff, who may or may not find my stuff. And I have all my books out there to be found. And I think of like Amazon as an outreach project, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a good attitude to focus on your people. And I do that now a lot more with my Patreon for sure. Right. But we're almost out of time. So I do want...
Oh, that's quick.
Yeah, I do also just want to come back on that direct store. So you've got swordschool.shop. And you have, or as we mentioned, all these books and products. A lot of authors now want to start selling direct. You've been doing it for a while. So what are your top tips for authors who might want to build their own store?
Well, do it, obviously, because it doesn't cost very much and it's kind of fun and you'll learn a lot doing it. If you want to actually sell books, the easiest way, well, easy is the wrong word, the most reliable way, I think, is have a list. It's the classic, have a newsletter. My friend Hugh Hancock told me this in 2015. He said, Guy, the money is in the list. And he was absolutely right. And you start with 5 friends on your email list, maybe, but you need to get the people who are interested in what you have to say to interact with you directly. And then when you have the next book for them, you can simply tell them, and a chunk of them will just go and buy it. And they'll buy it off the platform that you particularly send them to. I mean, I've been fielding emails for 20 years now from people saying, Guy, I want to buy your book. Where do you get the most money if I buy it? Right? Because the people who care, really care, and those are my people. And now I can just say, well, go to swordschool.shop, please. And now I actually have a really good answer for them, because until BookVault integrated with Shopify, I had direct ebook sales and direct course sales, but that integration is the game changer. That means I can focus all of my attention on that one place, because most of my people prefer paper. So most of my sales are paperbacks.
Right. Okay. No, that's really interesting. You mentioned merch very briefly and said that wasn't doing very well. Are you just cutting that out completely? Is that not something that's worked?
No,
I haven't even done it yet. So
it's sitting on my store, and every now and then somebody buys a t-shirt, but it's extremely rare. I don't mind. It's one of those things, like some of the books I've written, maybe 10 people bought them when they came out. And now 5 years later, there's maybe 100 sales a year or whatever, and it's finding its audience. It doesn't cost me anything to have the merch sitting there on Shopify, because I think it's called Printful. Shopify integrates with them. And so when someone orders a t-shirt, it's printed and shipped. So you don't have to hold any stock. So it doesn't cost me anything to keep it there. So I'm just going to leave it there until either it picks up, or I don't know, maybe one day I'll just stop it or start actually promoting it, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that side of things. But I had an interview with Alex Carver earlier this year, I think it was, and she said something which made a lot of difference, which was you don't have to have the merchandise selling all the time. So
True.
You can say, right, for the next 2 weeks, I'm selling this print run of, and I've just ordered some badges, creative badges from a site, and I just got it. And I'm like, I love these, but I can't do them at the quality I like print on demand. So I was
Right,
thinking
okay.
I would say, okay, these are available, everybody order, then it's closing, then I can put my kind of print run in. And so that freed me a little bit from thinking that everything has to be evergreen print on demand.
Sure, but is the fulfillment automated?
No, but that's the thing. This would be for a specific event, like a Kickstarter or something else where you're doing a special event. This was a more eventful thing.
I can see the value of that. I am allergic to packing and shipping stuff.
Oh,
and
no, me
printing out
too.
labels.
Me too,
So
for sure.
that's not a bad idea. And you can probably do that even with the print on demand stuff. You can just turn it off.
Yeah, turn it on and off.
Make an event out of turning it on again and see if anyone goes and buys it. It basically gives you a reason to mention it in the newsletter again, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Although, to be fair, I'm waiting for Book Vault to integrate a lot more of a lot more products. So I don't...
That'd be great. Stickers. We need stickers.
Well, they do have Photobubble as another business that they have. And I'm like, well, if you start doing this, that and the other... Because I did try Printful and I got some of the stuff and I was like, oh... This is not making me enough profit to be worth it, because obviously, you know, you have to, there's potential returns, and I wanted to do mugs, and then I was like, too painful.
I don't do returns, and I'm not shy about putting decent prices on things. So like my hardbacks are like 45 quid normally, and my paperbacks are 30, right? Because I'm selling a book that people want. It'll help solve a problem for them. They'll be working out of it for a long time. Honestly, it's cheap at that price.
Yeah, and no one else is doing it.
Right. And competing on price is a great way to turn into Walmart or die.
Or turn into, like Amazon KU, I mean. Okay, so we are out of time. So where can people find you and your books and your podcast online?
Well, they can go to swordschool.com and they can find everything there. And if they're interested in, so if listeners are interested in From Your Head to Their Hands, I've created a discount code on swordschool.shop. So if you put Joanna Penn with a double N into the discount field, you'll get 30% off the ebook of From Your Head to Their Hands. So swordschool.shop or swordschool.com, and Joanna Penn is the code.
Is that all one word and lowercase?
All one word, and it's you can put it in all caps. It's probably the easiest.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for that, and thanks so much for your time, Guy. That was great.
Thanks, Joe. Lovely talking to you.
So I hope you found the episode with Guy interesting, and I love the attitude that it is all about your people. And if you focus there on your people, you will draw others in over time. And I hope you can tell this from this show and the Patreon, is that I try and focus on my people. And remember that Guy has been doing this for 20 years, and my first book came out in 2007. So that's almost 17 years now. So if you're just starting out and you're in on book one or year one, or in the first few years, just take baby steps. You don't need to do everything we're all doing. What is one thing you can do to make a difference in the direction that you call success? As ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, joanna@thecreativepenn.com. Send me pictures of where you're listening, or your favourite crypt or cemetery or church. I love religious buildings and all that. I always love to see those. Coming up this week, I have an in-between-isode solo episode. Yes, it is 13 years as a full-time author entrepreneur, my lessons learned show. I left my job in September 2011, and every year I share my lessons. You can find them all at thecreativepenn.com/timeline. And on that same topic, it's actually very good timing, Sacha Black will be on the show next Monday from the Rebel Author podcast. Many of you will know Sacha or her alter ego, Ruby Rowe, but it's Sacha who's going to be on the show, not naughty Ruby. So Sasha will be on the show next Monday talking about pivoting genres, her lessons learned from 5 years full-time, and we talk about money and mindset and health and all kinds of things. And we're good friends, so it is a great discussion. And what was interesting is that her 5 years success parallels my 5 years success, and mine was in 2016. So very different market, very different tactics, very different situation, but similar results. So actually it's a very good discussion for encouraging you that you can meet certain goals in different ways. It doesn't have to be the same way as someone else. So in the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at The Creative Penn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.